The bridge of the UNS Liberty hummed with quiet tension as Admiral Jake Morrison watched the tactical display. 3 years of war against the Void Swarm had aged him beyond his 52 years, but his eyes still burned with determination. The massive alien bioships appeared on the screen like floating cities of death, their twisted organic hulls pulsing with sickly light. "Coalition forces are taking position behind our fleet," reported Commander Lisa Rodriguez from her station. Her voice carried the steady calm that had made her one of humanity's most trusted ship captains. "The Kethver battleships are holding back about 50,000 kilometers." Morrison nodded, but felt a familiar unease. The alien allies had been keeping more distance lately, always positioning themselves behind human ships during major engagements. The official explanation was tactical coordination, but something felt wrong. The Galactic Coalition had 5 major species fighting alongside humanity, yet increasingly it seemed like humans were doing most of the dying. "Sir, the Zephyrians are requesting permission to adjust their formation," called out Lieutenant Ben Parker from communications. "They want to move further back to provide better sensor coverage." Another excuse to avoid the front lines. Morrison had served in 3 major battles alongside these aliens, and each time they found reasons to stay away from the heaviest fighting. The psychic Mindari claimed their mental abilities were too valuable to risk in direct combat. The Aquatic Depths said their ships were designed for different tactical roles. The Insectoid Hive State insisted their technology required specific positioning. Only humans seemed willing to face the Void Swarm head-on. Their bioships were nightmarish creatures that fed on metal and energy, turning captured vessels into more of their kind. The swarm had consumed dozens of worlds, leaving nothing but dead rocks stripped of all life and resources. Every battle was a desperate struggle to prevent another planet from becoming a feeding ground. "Enemy contacts increasing," reported the sensor officer. 200 bioships confirmed, with more arriving every minute. Morrison studied the display. Kepler Station was humanity's most important research facility, housing the scientists working on anti-swarm weapons. If it fell, the war effort would suffer a devastating blow. The station's orbital defenses were strong, but not strong enough to handle this level of assault alone. "All human ships, this is Admiral Morrison," he announced over the fleet channel. "We are the shield that stands between the swarm and innocent lives. Today, we show them that humanity does not break." 200 human vessels moved into attack formation. Destroyers and frigates took point positions, while the heavier cruisers provided supporting fire. The Un's Phoenix, commanded by Captain Rodriguez, led the destroyer squadron with aggressive precision. These ships represented the best of human engineering and courage. Behind them, the alien coalition forces spread out in what they called a support formation. 500 ships from 5 different species, all with their own reasons for avoiding direct engagement. Morrison had questioned this arrangement before, but Coalition Command insisted that each species fought according to their natural strengths. The Void Swarm bioships began their approach. They moved unlike any normal spacecraft, writhing and undulating as if swimming through space. Their hulls were covered in what looked like scales or armor plates, and strange appendages reached out like tentacles. When they fired, streams of acidic energy that could eat through the strongest human armor. "First wave incoming," called Rodriguez from the Phoenix. Her destroyer squadron accelerated toward the enemy, weapons charging. "All ships, target the lead bioships. Make every shot count." The battle began with a thunderous exchange of fire. Human plasma cannons and missile batteries opened up against the advancing swarm, while the bioships responded with their corrosive energy streams. Space lit up with explosions as shields collapsed and hulls were breached. Morrison watched his tactical display with growing concern. The human ships were holding their own, but barely. Each destroyed bioship seemed to be replaced by two more. The swarm was throwing everything at Kepler Station, and human forces were taking heavy casualties. Coalition forces, we need immediate support, Morrison broadcast to the alien ships. Human vessels are taking severe losses. The response came from Keth4 Admiral Doomstrike, his translated voice carrying strange undertones. Human Admiral, we are providing sensor support and tactical coordination. Our position allows maximum battlefield awareness. Battlefield awareness meant nothing if they were not fighting. Morrison bit back his angry response and focused on the battle. 3. Human destroyers had already been lost. Their crews vaporized when swarm bioweapons breached their hulls. The Phoenix was taking damage, but still fighting, Rodriguez pushing her ship beyond safe limits to keep the enemy at bay. Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups from the coalition ships, reported the sensor officer. His voice carried confusion and growing alarm. Their weapons are powering up. Morrison felt ice form in his stomach. Targeting the swarm? A pause that lasted too long. No, sir, they're targeting us. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Morrison stared at the tactical display, watching as 500 alien ships turned their weapons toward the human fleet. Every coalition vessel that had fought alongside them for 3 years was now preparing to fire on human targets. This has to be a mistake. Rodriguez's voice came over the communication channel. Coalition forces, check your targeting systems. You're painting human ships. The response came from Admiral Doomstrike, and this time his translated voice carried. No pretense of friendship. There is no mistake, humans. Your usefulness has ended. The first volley came from the Zephyrian ships. Energy beams designed to punch through swarm bioarmor tore into human vessels with devastating effect. The destroyer Uns Atlanta exploded instantly, its fusion reactor breached by alien fire. Captain Ben Parker's final transmission cut off mid-sentence as his ship became expanding plasma. All human ships evasive action, Morrison shouted into his communicator. Coalition forces have turned hostile. Repeat, coalition forces are attacking human ships. But there was nowhere to run. The alien ships had positioned themselves perfectly, surrounding the human fleet while pretending to provide support. Human vessels found themselves caught between the advancing void swarm and their former allies. 500 against 200, with the element of surprise completely lost. The Mindari ships struck next, their psychic weapons somehow disrupting human computer systems. Ships began spinning out of control as their navigation systems failed. The aquatic depths used sonic weapons that shattered human hulls like glass. The Hive State deployed swarms of small fighters that attached to human ships like parasites. Rodriguez fought her ship with desperate skill, but the Phoenix was taking fire from all directions. Admiral, we can't hold this position. They planned this entire engagement. Morrison realized the horrible truth. The coalition had not just betrayed humanity in this moment. They had been planning this betrayal for months, possibly years. Every battle strategy they had shared, every tactical position they had suggested, all of it had been designed to put human ships at maximum disadvantage when the moment came. All remaining ships jump to emergency coordinates, Morrison ordered. Do not try to fight. Repeat, emergency evacuation only. 12 human ships managed to activate their jump drives before being destroyed. The rest of the fleet died in space, 200 vessels and their crews wiped out by the very allies they had trusted. As the UN's Liberty jumped to hyperspace, Morrison watched Kepler Station fall to the combined assault of swarm bioships and coalition forces working together. The betrayal was complete. Humanity stood alone in a galaxy that wanted them dead. 5 years had passed since the betrayal at Kepler Station, and the human survivors had learned to live like ghosts in the darkness between stars. Admiral Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching supply ships dock, with their precious cargo of salvaged materials and rescued civilians. His hair had gone completely gray, but his determination burned brighter than ever. The asteroid base hung in empty space, far beyond any charted system, hidden from both Coalition sensors and Void Swarm bioships. 50,000 humans called this cold rock home now, the last free members of their species in a galaxy that had marked them for extinction. The base had grown from a simple mining station into humanity's secret stronghold, carved deep into the asteroid's core, where no scanner could detect them. Dr. Amanda Clark emerged from the research levels, her lab coat stained with substances that would have been impossible to identify 5 years ago. She had been studying captured Void Swarm technology ever since their escape from Kepler Station, determined to understand the enemy that had been used as an excuse for humanity's destruction. Her discoveries were disturbing but potentially useful. The biosamples are responding better than expected, she reported to Morrison. The swarm organisms seem to have a collective memory that we can access under the right conditions. I'm learning how their technology actually works. Morrison nodded grimly. Any sign that they're working with the Coalition? Dr. Clark's expression darkened. That's the strange part. According to the bio-memories, the swarm never agreed to any treaty. They think the Coalition species are just another food source to be consumed later. The aliens betrayed us for nothing. The Admiral felt a familiar rage building in his chest. Humanity had been sacrificed based on a lie. The Coalition had convinced themselves that destroying their human allies would buy them peace with the Void Swarm, but the bioships had no concept of treaties or agreements. They only understood consumption and growth. Colonel Rick Hayes entered the observation area, his combat uniform bearing the scars of recent action. He commanded the human commando teams that struck at abandoned Coalition facilities, gathering intelligence and supplies for the growing resistance. His latest mission had taken him to a former Zephyrian research station. The aliens are getting desperate, Hayes reported. Their communications are full of panic about increased swarm activity. It looks like their peace deal is falling apart, faster than they expected. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing known Coalition territories. Red markers indicated worlds that had gone silent in recent months, most likely consumed by advancing bioships. A Void Swarm was doing exactly what humanity had always known it would do, treating the galaxy as an endless feeding ground. How many of our people did you find? Morrison asked. Hayes's face grew hard. 17 survivors on Zephyria 7, hidden in the ruins of a human embassy. The aliens had left them to starve after stripping the planet of anything useful. They're on their way here now. Every rescued human was precious to the survivors. The Coalition had been thorough in their extermination efforts, hunting down human colonies and settlements across known space. Billions had died in the months following Kepler Station, wiped out by their former allies who claimed they were preventing future conflicts. Commodore Lisa Rodriguez joined the group, her captain's uniform now bearing the insignia of the human Resistance Fleet. She commanded the 12 ships that had escaped the original betrayal, plus several vessels they had captured or constructed in the years since. Her latest scouting reports were troubling. Long-range sensors are picking up massive swarm movements near the Kethver home system, Rodriguez reported. At least 1,000 bioships, possibly more. It looks like they're preparing for a major assault. Dr. Clark looked up from her datapad. That matches what I'm seeing in the biosamples. The swarm collective memory shows plans for something they call the Great Feeding. They intend to consume every advanced civilization in this part of the galaxy. Morrison felt a cold satisfaction at the news. The Coalition species had murdered billions of humans to buy themselves safety from the Void Swarm, but they had only delayed their own destruction. The bioships would eventually consume every world in Coalition space, just as they had always planned to do. Are we going to warn them? Rodriguez asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Why would we? Morrison replied. They made their choice when they opened fire on human ships. Let them face the consequences. The conversation was interrupted by an alert from the communications center. Lieutenant Steve Martinez, one of the younger officers who had joined the resistance after his family was killed on Earth's colonies, brought urgent news from their deep space monitoring network. Sir, we're intercepting coalition broadcasts on all frequencies, Martinez reported. They're trying to contact any surviving human forces. The messages are offering full pardons, territorial concessions, and military support against the swarm. Hayes laughed bitterly. Now they want our help. After they murdered our families and destroyed our worlds, they expect us to come running back to save them. Morrison studied the incoming messages on the main display. Desperate pleas from coalition leaders who had spent years hunting down human survivors now begged for assistance against the very enemy they had claimed to have neutralized. The irony was almost too perfect. What should our response be? Rodriguez asked. Morrison thought for a long moment, watching the frantic alien communications scroll across the screen. These were the same species that had betrayed humanity's trust, murdered human children, and celebrated the extinction of Earth's colonies. They had shown no mercy when they held the advantage. Send them nothing, Morrison decided. Complete communication silence. Let them wonder if any humans are still alive to receive their messages. Dr. Clark had been studying her biosamples during the discussion. Admiral, I think I've found something important. The swarm technology isn't just biological, it's partially quantum-based. If we could learn to interface with their systems, we might be able to turn their own weapons against them. Morrison looked at her with new interest. Explain. The bioships share information through quantum entanglement networks. Dr. Clark continued. It's how they coordinate attacks across vast distances. But if we could hack into those networks, we could potentially control their actions, or at least disrupt their communications. The implications were staggering. Humanity might be able to use swarm technology not just to defend themselves, but to wage war in ways their enemies never expected. The species that had betrayed them would face threats from two directions instead. Of one, Colonel Hayes smiled grimly. How long would it take to develop this technology? Dr. Clark considered the question. With our current resources, maybe 2 years. But if we could capture more swarm bioships for study, we could cut that time in half. Morrison nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. Colonel Hayes, I want you to plan raids on swarm-controlled systems. We need fresh samples and intact technology. Commodore Rodriguez, prepare the fleet for extended operations. As the meeting broke up and the officers returned to their duties, Morrison remained on the observation deck, watching the activity of Haven Station below. 50,000 humans working together to survive in a hostile galaxy, driven by the memory of betrayal and the promise of eventual justice. The Coalition had taught humanity a valuable lesson about the nature of galactic politics. Trust was weakness, mercy was foolishness, and survival required the willingness to do whatever was necessary. When the time came to reclaim their place in the galaxy, humans would remember these lessons well. In the darkness between stars, humanity was growing stronger while their enemies grew weaker. The betrayers and the swarm would both learn that destroying Earth's children had been the greatest mistake in galactic history. The Keffer homeworld burned in the void of space, its 3 moons cracked and bleeding atmosphere into the darkness. Admiral Doomstrike watched from his flagship as Void Swarm bioships consumed the orbital defense platforms he had spent decades building. The creatures that his people had made peace with were now devouring everything the Keffa had ever created. Across Coalition space, the same scene played out on dozens of worlds. The Zephyrian research colonies went silent one by one as bioships. stripped them of all useful materials. The Mindari meditation planets screamed psychic death cries that echoed across subspace before falling into eternal silence. The aquatic cities of the depths were drained dry, leaving only empty ocean floors behind. Admiral Doomstrike activated his emergency communications array, broadcasting on frequencies that had not been used since the human betrayal. Any surviving human forces, this is Coalition Command requesting immediate assistance. We offer full restoration of human territories and complete technological sharing in exchange for military support against the Void Swarm threat. The response was silence. Empty static filled the communication channels, where human voices had once coordinated battle plans and shared tactical information. After 5 years of systematic extermination, the Coalition leaders were no longer certain that any humans remained alive to receive their desperate pleas. But in the darkness between stars, human ships moved like ghosts through space. Commander Steve Martinez piloted his modified frigate through the wreckage of a destroyed Zephyrian convoy, his vessel's new technology making it invisible to both swarm biosensors and Coalition detection systems. The ship had been rebuilt using hybrid technology that Dr. Amanda Clark had developed from captured swarm specimens. Ghost 1 to Haven Base, Martinez reported over encrypted channels. The Zephyrian supply fleet has been completely consumed. No survivors detected, but I'm reading massive swarm bioship concentrations moving toward their industrial worlds. The message reached Haven Station, where Supreme Commander Jake Morrison coordinated humanity's return to known space. He no longer called himself Admiral, having taken a new title that reflected humanity's changed circumstances. The human survivors were no longer part of any galactic alliance or coalition. They were something entirely new. Dr. Clark worked in her expanded laboratory complex, surrounded by swarm biotechnology that would have horrified her 5 years earlier. She had learned to interface directly with the alien organisms, using neural implants that allowed her to access their collective memory networks. The process was dangerous and painful, but it had given humanity unprecedented understanding of their enemies. The bioships are reporting back to something they call the Prime Collective, Dr. Clark explained to Morrison during their daily briefing. It's like a central intelligence that coordinates all swarm activities across the galaxy. If we could locate and disrupt it, the entire swarm network might collapse. Morrison studied the tactical displays showing swarm movements throughout Coalition space. The bioships were following predictable patterns, consuming worlds in order of their technological development and resource density. The aliens who had betrayed humanity were learning the same lesson that countless other civilizations had learned before them. Lieutenant Colonel Jenny Brooks entered the briefing room, her appearance startling to anyone who remembered her from before the war. Volunteer testing of Dr. Clark's bioenhancement procedures had changed her in fundamental ways. Her reflexes were faster than any normal human, her strength had increased dramatically, and her eyes now carried flecks of the same bioluminescence found in swarm organisms. The Liberation Army is ready for deployment, Brooks reported. We have 300 volunteers who have completed the enhancement procedures. They can survive in vacuum, interface with alien technology, and operate independently for extended periods. Morrison nodded approvingly. The Human Liberation Army represented something that the galaxy had never seen before. Soldiers enhanced with captured swarm biotechnology, trained to use enemy capabilities against their creators. They were no longer entirely human, but they retained human intelligence and determination. Commodore Lisa Rodriguez arrived from the fleet anchorage, where human ships underwent constant modification and improvement. Her vessels now incorporated technology stolen from both Coalition archives and swarm bioships. They could phase in and out of normal space, making them nearly impossible to detect or target. The Ghost Fleet is reporting successful strikes against Coalition communication networks, Rodriguez announced. Their military coordination is breaking down as we disrupt their command structures. Several Zephyrian admirals have attempted to surrender to our forces. Morrison felt no satisfaction at the news. What was our response? We ignored them completely, Rodriguez replied. No communication, no acknowledgement, no mercy. They wanted us extinct, so from their perspective, we are extinct. The strategy was working perfectly. Human forces struck at coalition supply lines and communication networks while carefully avoiding direct confrontation with void swarm bioships. The aliens found themselves fighting a war on two fronts, facing an enemy that consumed everything and ghosts that disrupted everything else. Doctor. Clark activated a holographic display showing intercepted coalition communications. The alien leaders were growing increasingly desperate as their carefully planned peace treaty collapsed around them. Admiral Doomstrike had been demoted after losing the Kethver homeworld, and Zephyrian Tech Prime was broadcasting surrender. Offers on all frequencies. They're trying every diplomatic channel they can think of, Dr. Clark reported. Trade concessions, territorial gifts, technology sharing, even offering to serve as subordinate species under human leadership. They're terrified. Morrison watched the display with cold satisfaction. These were the same aliens who had celebrated humanity's near extinction, who had hunted down human survivors like animals, who had murdered billions of innocent people for the promise of safety that never materialized. Colonel Rick Hayes appeared on the main communication screen from his position near the former coalition capital. His commando teams had been sabotaging critical infrastructure throughout alien space, making it impossible for coalition forces to mount effective resistance against the swarm. Sir, we've intercepted communications indicating that the coalition is planning to abandon their outer territories, Hayes reported. They're pulling all remaining forces back to the core systems for a final stand. Morrison considered this information carefully. The coalition retreat would leave dozens of worlds undefended, allowing the void swarm to consume them without resistance. It also meant that the alien leadership was finally understanding the true scope of their situation. Let them retreat, Morrison decided. The more worlds they abandon, the stronger the swarm becomes. Eventually, they'll have nowhere left to run. Lieutenant. Colonel Brooks stepped forward. Sir, request permission to deploy Liberation Army units to coalition core systems. We could accelerate their collapse and gather additional intelligence on both coalition and swarm capabilities. Morrison looked at the enhanced soldier, noting how she moved with predatory grace that seemed almost alien. The bio-enhancement procedures had saved humanity, but they had also changed what it meant to be human. The volunteers were still loyal to their species, but they were becoming something new and dangerous. Permission granted, Morrison said finally. Begin infiltration operations, but avoid direct engagement with swarm forces. Let the aliens and bioships weaken each other while we gather strength. As the briefing concluded and his officers returned to their duties, Morrison remained alone with the tactical displays. The galaxy that had tried to destroy humanity was now tearing itself apart, and human forces moved through the chaos like avenging spirits. The betrayal at Kepler Station had been intended to eliminate humanity as a threat to galactic stability. Instead, it had forged them into something far more dangerous than they had ever been as peaceful explorers. The coalition had taught humanity that mercy was weakness and trust was foolishness. Soon, their former allies would learn the consequences of bad education. The Zephyrian core system had become the coalition's final stronghold, a desperate gathering of alien ships from across the dying galaxy. Senator Prime Zeph 9 stood in the command center of the largest space station, watching tactical displays that showed the approaching doom of his civilization. 3 billion Zephyrians crowded onto orbital platforms and starships, refugees from worlds consumed by the void swarm or abandoned during the chaotic retreat. Around the system, the combined fleets of 5 alien species formed defensive positions. That would have been impressive 5 years ago. Kethver battleships with their heavy armor plating, Mindari vessels crackling with psychic energy, depth ships designed for fluid combat maneuvers, and hive-state carriers releasing clouds of fighter drones. Together, they represented the last military strength of the Galactic Coalition. But Zeph-9 knew their situation was hopeless. The Void Swarm had consumed 2/3 of Coalition space, growing stronger with each devoured world. Their bioships now numbered in the tens of thousands, and the collective intelligence guiding them had learned to counter every Coalition tactic. Worse still, the mysterious attacks on communication networks and supply lines continued, as if some invisible enemy was working to ensure Coalition defeat. Broadcast surrender terms on all frequencies, Zeph-9 ordered his communication staff. Offer complete technological sharing, territorial concessions, and reparations to any surviving human forces. Promise them leadership positions in a reformed galactic government. The messages went out across space, desperate pleas for forgiveness. From the species that had orchestrated humanity's betrayal, Coalition leaders who had once celebrated the extinction of human colonies now begged for the return of their former allies. The irony was bitter, but survival outweighed pride. The response came not through normal communication channels, but through the sudden appearance of ships that materialized from empty space like ghosts becoming solid. Commodore Lisa Rodriguez commanded the assault fleet from her flagship Un's Vengeance, a vessel that bore no resemblance to the destroyers that had once fought alongside Coalition forces. The ship's hull seemed to shimmer and shift, incorporating biotechnology that made it appear almost alive. "This is Fleet Admiral Rodriguez of the Terran Space Forces." Her voice echoed across all Coalition frequencies. "You have 30 minutes to prepare for judgment." The title was new, reflecting humanity's evolution during their years in exile. They no longer considered themselves part of any galactic community. They were Terrans, conquerors returning to claim what had been stolen from them. The ghost fleet that appeared around Rodriguez's flagship numbered only 50 ships, but each vessel radiated power that made Coalition admirals nervous. Senator Prime Zeph-9 activated his personal communication system, broadcasting directly to the human fleet. "Fleet Admiral Rodriguez, we acknowledge the grave injustices committed against humanity. We offer complete restoration of human territories, full technological sharing, and massive reparations for the crimes of the past. Please, our peoples can work together against the swarm threat." Rodriguez's image appeared on Coalition screens throughout the system. Her face had changed during the years of exile, bearing bioluminescent markings that indicated integration with hybrid technology. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate on multiple frequencies. "You taught us valuable lessons about galactic politics," Rodriguez said calmly. "You showed us that mercy is weakness, that trust leads to betrayal, and that only strength matters in this universe. Thank you for the education." Admiral Doomstrike activated his fleet's targeting systems, painting human ships with weapon locks. "Human forces, you are outnumbered 10-1. Withdraw now, and we will honor our offer of peaceful coexistence." The response was immediate and devastating. Captain Tony Fisher's stealth frigates materialized inside the Coalition defensive perimeter, their hybrid technology having allowed them to bypass all detection systems. Simultaneously, the main human fleet began a coordinated assault that utilized tactics no Coalition species had ever seen. The UNS Vengeance fired weapons that seemed to bend space itself, creating gravity wells that pulled Coalition ships out of formation. Other human vessels released clouds of biomechanical organisms that attached to alien hulls and began corrupting their computer systems from within. The technology was a fusion of human engineering and swarm bioadaptation, creating capabilities that neither species could achieve alone. All coalition ships. This is Admiral Doomstrike ordering general retreat. The Kethver commander broadcast as his flagship took crippling damage. Human forces are using unknown weapons technology. We cannot maintain defensive positions. But there was nowhere to retreat. The Ghost Fleet had positioned itself to cut off all escape routes, while smaller human vessels systematically eliminated coalition command ships. The battle was not a conflict between equals, but an execution carried out by technological superiors against inferior opponents. Lieutenant Colonel Jenny Brooks led her liberation Army forces in boarding actions against disabled coalition vessels. Her enhanced soldiers moved through alien ship corridors like phantoms, their biomodifications allowing them to interface directly with enemy technology. They didn't take prisoners or accept surrenders, methodically working through each ship to eliminate all resistance. Coalition Command, this is Senator Primes F9 requesting immediate ceasefire. The alien leader broadcast desperately. We are prepared to discuss any terms you consider acceptable. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez appeared on his screen, her bioluminescent markings pulsing with what might have been amusement. You eliminated 3 billion humans because you thought we were a threat to galactic stability. You were right to be concerned. The Mindari ships attempted to use their psychic abilities against human forces, but discovered that the bio-enhanced crews were immune to mental manipulation. The hybrid technology in their nervous systems created interference that blocked psychic attacks while enhancing their own cognitive abilities. They fought with the tactical awareness of humans, combined with the biological efficiency of Swarm. ORGANISMS Dr. Amanda Clark monitored the battle from her command center, analyzing how coalition technology functioned under combat conditions. Her bioneural interface allowed her to process information faster than any normal human, identifying weaknesses in alien designs that could be exploited. The knowledge would be useful when humanity began its expansion into former coalition territories. The depth ships are attempting to use sonic weapons, Dr. Clark reported to Rodriguez. Recommend deploying acoustic dampening fields. The human ships adapted instantly, their biotechnology responding to threats in real time. What had taken the coalition years to develop, human vessels could counter in minutes. The fusion of human creativity with swarm adaptation created a technological advantage that no pure-breed species could match. Supreme. Commander Morrison watched the battle from Haven Station, his expression showing no emotion as coalition forces were systematically destroyed. These were the same aliens who had hunted down human children, who had celebrated the burning of Earth's colonies, who had shown no mercy when they held the advantage. Sir, coalition leaders are requesting permission to discuss surrender terms, reported his communications officer. Morrison considered the request for exactly 3 seconds. Inform them that humanity accepts only unconditional surrender. Any ship that continues to resist will be destroyed along with its crew. The coalition's final resistance collapsed within hours. Those ships that surrendered were seized by liberation. Army boarding parties, their crews taken into custody for processing. Those that attempted to flee were hunted down by Ghost Fleet vessels that could track them through hyperspace itself. As the last coalition battleship exploded in brilliant fire, Fleet Admiral Rodriguez broadcast a message across the entire system. Let this be recorded in whatever archives survive. You came against us with everything you had, and still you lost. Because humanity doesn't just adapt to survive, we evolve to dominate. The Zephyrian core system fell under human control within 6 hours of the battle's beginning. Coalition leaders who had once commanded the respect of the galaxy now knelt before human officers, begging for the lives of their remaining civilians. The species that had betrayed humanity's trust would learn what it meant to be at the mercy of those they had wronged. 6 months after the fall of the Zephyrian core system, the galaxy bore little resemblance to the civilization that had once betrayed humanity. Supreme Commander Morrison stood in the throne room of what had been the Coalition Senate building, now renamed the Terran Imperial Palace. The massive structure on the world formerly known as Zephyria Prime had been rebuilt to honor the 3 billion humans who died in the Great Betrayal. The planet itself had been renamed New Terra, its blue oceans and green continents transformed by human engineering. Where alien cities once stood, human settlements now thrived with populations relocated from the hidden colonies that had survived the purges. The surviving Zephyrians, along with members of the other Coalition species, lived in designated reservation zones under strict Terran oversight. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez entered the throne room, her bioluminescent markings now fully integrated into intricate patterns that marked her as one of humanity's enhanced elite. Her report contained information that would reshape the galaxy's future once again. Long-range sensors had detected the approach of something that dwarfed even the massive swarm fleets they had already faced. "The sensors don't lie," Rodriguez said as she activated the holographic display. "It's the largest bioformation we've ever detected. Queen-class vessels the size of small moons, escorted by thousands of standard bioships. This is the Void Swarm's final push. Everything they have left." Morrison studied the tactical information with the calm expression that had carried him through years of war and betrayal. The approaching swarm fleet represented every bioship that had survived human sabotage and Coalition resistance. Ancient Queen vessels that had slept in the depths of space for millennia were now awakening to join the assault on the galaxy's new masters. Dr. Amanda Clark materialized beside the display, her form shimmering as she transitioned from bioneural interface back to physical reality. The enhancement procedures had advanced far beyond simple biological modification, allowing her consciousness to exist partially in both human and swarm network systems. She had become something entirely new, a bridge between species that retained human loyalty while possessing capabilities that transcended normal biology. "The biomemories are clear," Dr. Clark reported. "This is what they call the final convergence, when all swarm forces gather to consume the galaxy's most advanced civilizations. They've been building toward this moment for centuries." Morrison nodded as he processed the implications. The Void Swarm had never been interested in the Coalition's peace treaty or any form of coexistence. They had simply been gathering strength while their enemies weakened themselves through internal conflict. Humanity's betrayal had been part of a larger plan that the Coalition leadership never understood. Lieutenant Colonel Jenny Brooks appeared at the chamber's entrance, her enhanced physiology allowing her to move without making any sound. Her liberation army had grown to encompass 10,000 volunteers, each one transformed by bioenhancement procedures that made them superior to normal humans in every measurable way. They retained human consciousness and loyalty, but their capabilities now exceeded anything the galaxy had seen. "The reservation zones are in panic," Brooks reported. "The surviving Coalition populations are begging for protection from the approaching swarm fleet. They're offering to serve as laborers, soldiers, or slaves in exchange for Terran protection." Morrison felt no sympathy for the alien species that had once celebrated humanity's near extinction. The Kethver who had bombed human colonies, the Zephyrians who had hunted human survivors, the Mindari who had used psychic torture on human prisoners, all of them now cowered before the very enemy they had tried to appease through genocide. "What is our response?" Brooks asked. "The same response they gave to human civilians when the swarm first attacked," Morrison replied coldly. "They chose their ally when they opened fire at Kepler Station. Let them face the consequences of that choice." Fleet Admiral Rodriguez activated the planetary defense systems that now protected New Terra and the other human-controlled worlds. The technology was a fusion of human engineering, captured coalition science, and adapted swarm biomechanics. Orbital platforms that looked like living organisms, bristled with weapons that could reshape matter at the molecular level. The approaching swarm fleet entered the outer detection grid exactly as predicted by Dr. Clark's calculations. Thousands of bioships arranged in formations that resembled some vast living creature, with queen vessels at the center, pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that coordinated the entire force. This was not just an invasion fleet, but the mobile heart of swarm civilization. All Terran forces to battle stations, Morrison announced across the Imperial communication network. Today we face the enemy that our former allies tried to use as an excuse for our destruction. Show them what humanity has become. The battle began at the edge of the new Terra system, as human Ghost Fleet vessels engaged the swarm vanguard. Captain Tony Fisher's stealth frigates materialized inside enemy formations, their hybrid technology allowing them to phase through bioship defenses before striking at vulnerable points. The swarm collective intelligence had never encountered opponents who could move between dimensions. Dr. Clark's greatest achievement revealed itself as human cyber warfare specialists uploaded viral programs directly into the swarm bio network. The technology that allowed bioships to coordinate their attacks across vast distances became their greatest vulnerability when human hackers turned it against them. Entire squadrons of swarm vessels began attacking each other as corrupted data spread through their collective consciousness. Bio-network integrity is collapsing, Dr. Clark reported with satisfaction. The viral programs are spreading faster than their collective intelligence can adapt. We're turning their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The queen vessels, ancient creatures that had devoured countless civilizations, found themselves facing an enemy unlike anything in their species' memory. Human weapons that manipulated gravity and time struck at bioships that had survived for millennia. Liberation Army boarding parties, enhanced with captured swarm biology, moved through enemy vessels like viruses, attacking a living organism. Morrison watched the battle displays as the impossible became reality. The void swarm, the terror that had consumed entire galactic sectors, was being systematically destroyed by human forces that numbered less than 1 million individuals. The enhancement procedures and hybrid technology had created warriors who could match IO ships in their own element. Fleet Admiral Rodriguez coordinated the final assault from her flagship as the last queen vessel attempted to retreat into deep space. All ships converge on the primary target. Do not allow any swarm vessel to escape. The ancient queen, a creature older than human civilization, died in nuclear fire as Terran weapons breached its bio-armor and ignited its organic core. With its destruction, the remaining swarm bioships lost coordination and began drifting helplessly through space. The collective intelligence that had guided them for eons simply ceased to exist. As the battle ended and the last bioship was destroyed, Morrison broadcast a message across the galaxy on all frequencies. His words reached the surviving coalition populations huddled in their reservation zones, as well as any other species that might be listening from distant systems. Let this moment be remembered throughout the galaxy, Morrison's voice echoed. Across space, they came with everything they had, and still they lost. The void swarm that consumed civilizations for millions of years has been destroyed by humanity. The coalition species that betrayed us to buy peace have learned that there is no peace for those who murder children. 5 years later, Morrison stood once again in the throne room of the Terran Imperial Palace, but now he wore the robes of Terran High Emperor. The galaxy had been completely transformed under human rule, with former coalition worlds serving as industrial centers and agricultural zones for the growing human population. The alien species that survived lived as subjects in an empire that spanned from the galactic core to the outer rim territories. monuments to the great betrayal stood on every world. Massive structures that ensured future generations would never forget the price of trusting alien species. The inscription on the largest memorial, visible from orbit around New Terra, contained the words that had become humanity's guiding principle. They wanted us extinct. Instead, they made us eternal. Human exploration fleets launched daily toward unexplored regions of the galaxy, carrying colonists and soldiers to worlds that had never known intelligent life. The species that had once dismissed humans as primitive now served their former allies as laborers and servants. The betrayal at Kepler Station had been intended to eliminate humanity as a threat to galactic stability. Instead, it had transformed them into the galaxy's undisputed masters, rulers of an empire built on the ashes of those who had dared to raise their hands against Earth's children. The lesson had been learned by all surviving species. In this galaxy, only human strength could be trusted, and only human mercy would be granted to those wise enough to kneel before their betters.